It's just two girls giving their 2 cents.
Thanks so much for joining us today. We're very excited to have our friends of the podcast, Reid and Carl, on with us. Today is our first episode that's male versus female. You guys typically listen to me and Ashley, which is so much fun. I know you love it, but we're happy to get a little bit of male perspective. And it is the week of Valentine's Day, so love is in the air, and there's a lot of emotions. There's hearts everywhere. There's candy everywhere. You see it wherever you go. But we're just going to kind of delve into some relationship-related questions. And I think we all have kind of different stages of, like, where we are in our relationships and, like, even our history and stuff like that. But I think we'll all bring a little bit something different to the table. So starting out, we're going to go through some relationship deal breakers. I have a list here of 50. We're not going to quite go through all of them. That would be exhausting and both emotionally and physically exhausting. But I think we can hit these like top ones and kind of see where our opinions align and like differ, because I think that'll be really interesting. So without further ado, we're going to kick it off with deal breaker number 1. I guess this maybe doesn't apply to us because we are pretty young, but doesn't like children. Have you ever had that question? I mean, I know I've discussed that with people I've been with before. Like, oh, like, will we have kids one day? Or like, do you ever want to have a kid?
Yeah, no. For me, I mean, I obviously most of my relationships, and if not all my relationships, I've obviously been too young or, not to have a kid and whatnot. But there's always that, fear of like, what if they don't, right? Because eventually, in my head, I have this layout of like, oh, I want kids someday. Like, that'd be awesome. But I guess I've really never had the situation of like someone not wanting to have kids, honestly.
Yeah.
I think as you get older, like I've read somewhere that people say like you don't want to have kids unless you meet the person that you want to have kids with. But I think there are people that just know right off the bat, like, I am somebody who wants to have kids or I'm not somebody who wants to have kids. I have a friend, she's my age, she's 21. She is now in a new relationship, and they've been dating for about 6 months now, probably-ish. And until she met him, she was like, oh, I'm never going to have kids. It's not my thing. It's not my style. But now that she has met him, she does want to have kids.
My cousin's exactly like that, right? He was... Up until he met this one gal, he was, I'm never having kids, I'm not having kids, etc. He meets this girl, and she has a son already. And months into their relationship, he is this kid's father. And like that, I think that viewpoint of having a kid, or like, actually having that opportunity in front of you and like something that you truly love, like that's a whole new like door that you can open.
Yeah, I feel like even though I've never been in a relationship, I never really had that like discussion with someone, I feel like you go into, or at least I would go into a relationship with my view of like yeah, I want to have kids and I want to find someone that kind of shares that as well. Obviously it's a discussion you have a little bit longer down the line and not like first date conversation, but I think it's still something that's important to look at,
Yeah, I found there's some danger in like the future tense talk, because I'll be like, I want 5 kids and I'm going to name, like I have their names picked out. Like I just start saying things that are so far-fetched that it gets annoying, but in a joking way. Like that's my personality. Like I'm laughing about it, but I think it can be scary, and it can be like almost to some people like such a serious topic that they don't even really want to talk about it, especially in a new relationship or a young relationship.
Yeah, and for us, since we are younger, most of us in this room, actually all of us in this room are 21 or younger. So for us, having that kind of conversation this young isn't as scary or as real, because for most of us, except for Reid, we're all in like newer relationships or like relationships that are still growing. It's not like a 5-year relationship, 6-year relationship. Like we're still in that developing stage of like learning how people work and in different situations and how to handle different like scenarios. So for us, I think when we have the kid conversation, it's more like in general, do you want to have kids someday? Not when do you want to have kids? How many do you want? Where do you want to live? It's like a very casual conversation. But I guess like for me, if I found out the person I was with did not want to have kids ever and they were set on it, I would probably not want to do that because I want to have kids at some point, not in like within the next year, but at some point in my life.
No, I completely agree. And kind of going to a little bit of the future talk, or like having that conversation about the future and talking about the future. Years ago when I was in like I would consider to be my first real relationship, I completely told her, I sat down with her, I said, I do not want to talk about the future. Obviously we can make plans, like if we want to go to a concert or whatever in a few months, but like I am not going to sit down and plan out where we're going to live, plan out how many kids we're going to have, what we're going to name them, blah, 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 blah. Because even though I'm like dating with intent to eventually marry that person, I don't want to like plan out this entire life with them and then realize that they're not the right person for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, kind of going off of that, like if I guess like if you have that talk too early, and then something kind of goes wrong down the line, though, it can almost make it like the breakup harder too, because you had this like almost like perfect future planned out in your mind, and then you have it like taken away basically. So I feel like if you keep that stuff until you're more like committed, like maybe like a year in or even longer, you start to kind of see more of a future with that person because you've been with them so long.
Yeah, you're also kind of setting these unrealistic standards of like it's unrealistic that things are going to unfold exactly the way you want them to, especially when you get so like to the book of how society is like laid out marriage and kids and everything. So I think it's dangerous. I found it in my own relationship. I'm always saying things that don't even happen, that aren't even like in my realm of like they're going to be like something that could happen next week. It's like years down the line, and it's just not. I found it's not a good element to add.
Well, now I have a question for all of you guys. For different people, different length of time is like a time constant. Like for some people, a 1-year relationship is a long relationship, and for other people, like a 5-year relationship is a long relationship. Like, what do you guys think would be considered like a good length of time to be in a relationship with somebody where it's like this is going somewhere?
For me, that 1-year mark has almost seemed like impossible to hit because it sounds really weird, but I've been in 2 relationships that have gone for 11 months. And I was in one relationship that went for like 5-6 months, and now being in a relationship that's going for another 6 months, like I think that year mark is kind of where I'm at. Like that's my next like goal almost, right? Like, once we've hit that 1 year, then we can start thinking about maybe more of like, oh, well, maybe you can come with my family on vacation or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally get that. I've noticed for a lot of people, it's like 1 year is like a breakup time, 4 years is a breakup time, 8 years is a breakup time, and like 10 years, it's like every chunk of time is when most people put it together and they're like, wait a minute, do I want to be with this person or do I not? It's very rarely like a year and 2 months. Like it's like, oh, they're going on their 4th year and then they break up because they finally realize, wait a minute, this is not what I want. But it took them that long to realize it. And sometimes at that point, you're already so deep. Like you said, your 1 year for you, Carl, is like your time where you're like, all right, now I'm going to plan what the next step would be, because that would be like a milestone for you since you haven't had the 1 year mark yet.
Well, I think the way we measure things is like, it's almost putting a pressure on us to like reassess our values, even if it's not necessary. Like we like in our society put a lot of pressure on anniversaries and like it's our 8-month like it used to be like 1 year. Now it's like 3 months, 4 months. And I think social media has a huge part in that. But I remember, especially when I was in high school, that was a huge thing. I don't think so much now. People my age aren't as much of like, it's our 6-month, it's our 8-month, but I feel like there's just so much, like, there's such a timestamp on everything, and when we do that, it makes you think, like, oh, wow, 6 months have gone by, and I'm starting to not want this. Like, that's when people start to reassess things, when they realize, like, the amount of time that has gone by.
Yeah, going off of that, I mean, when you hit that, like, 1 year mark, with that anniversary, you, like, take time and almost, like, look back, like, everything that's happened in, like, the past year, and I think a lot of people realize, like, well, maybe this isn't the person that I want to be with. They look back and see good things, but they also may see some bad things, that may be some like red flags coming up. Maybe I need to kind of rethink this. So going off of what you said, Ashley, like where people break up after that 1 year marker, I think it's because they do like a ton of reflecting and being like they look back and see like, well, is this really something that I want to continue going forward?
And in that time, people can change also, right? So, and kind of go back to what you were saying, Megan, of like, the way I kind of lay out a lot of my relationships is we can celebrate a 6-month anniversary and then a year anniversary, and then it's all years after that. That's the way that I've always kind of put it in my head, right? So that's kind of the conversation that I've had with them. Set half a year. That's my half year is literally coming up in just a few days here. With my girlfriend. Oh, thank you. Yeah, like we can like celebrate that. It's not going to be anything massive, right? Like sure, we can go out and celebrate. We literally will forget our month anniversaries. Be like, oh my gosh, like, oh, it's our 4-month anniversary yesterday, right? We completely will blow it off. But that 6 month I think was always kind of like, this is half a year. Like that's kind of, you're getting more dedicated, right? You're kind of really getting into a relationship. You're kind of out of that honeymoon phase in a way, right? You're starting to get down with a routine with the person, and then from there you get to see it. When you go to a year, then you're at a full routine, and in a year someone can change, and a lot can happen in a year. So your relationship can be 120% different than what it was a year ago. Right, and that could be like a lot of the reason why people, like you were saying, Ashley, why a lot of people like can break up around those kind of big time things,
Well, I can totally agree with you where you finally see a person go through their life cycle changes, like their different points in life. It's also interesting because we're all still in school except for Megan. Megan graduated, but for the three of us that are here, Carl, myself, and Reid, we are all still in school, so the relationships that we would have at this time are going to be way different than the type of relationship that we would have after graduation when you're kind of out in the quote-unquote real world and trying to find a job and trying to figure out housing and living situations where it's not like this idealistic dome over your life. Because right now, the changes, for real though, because for Megan now, her relationship can progress in a different way because she's done with school. Yeah. She doesn't have to worry about that. And I believe your significant other, he's done with school now.
Yeah, he finished the same time.
So, so for you guys to move forward.
I'm ready to birth.
Yeah, oh my goodness.
Day after graduation, I'm like, no,
can I be the godmother?
Yes.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Carl dibs.
Well, no, I think right when I graduated, it was like, okay, well, now we don't have that. Like, I think something, too, is like, it's almost like an excuse of like, well, we're still in college, so we have to wait till school's done. And then school finishes, you're like, hi, so what are we doing now?
And and you also have that routine of college, right? So you have those things that you have to be at. You have to be at this class. You have to do this. These things that you have to do. Now, if you get out of college and you don't directly go into a job, you have a lot of free time, and that free time can be very like straining almost on a relationship in my mind when you have too much free time in my mind, because you have nothing better to do. I don't know, that could be something completely different, but
I feel like you're talking about with like the routine of college, like that makes it, I feel, a lot easier to kind of maintain something, especially if you guys are going to the same school. You have that like you have like, okay, like my class is out at this time and yours is out at this time, so we can always meet up like from this time on these days. So you build that routine in, but when you leave school, you're out in the real world, you have your job and your schedules get busier, and that time is kind of more hard to find. So I don't know, I feel like that could also be kind of like a breaking point for a lot of relationships, because people will say like, well, my schedule's getting busier and we don't have as much time together, and things like that.
Yeah, I feel that. I start crying. No, it's hard in general. Graduating college, it's hard to like. You're figuring yourself out in a completely new way. Even just yourself not having that routine that you're used to. So to have that, like to have you going through that and them going through that at the exact same time, it's like it's a little frantic. But I think like a true sign of like, okay, we're gonna be fine, is if you're like. You're aware of that and you're working towards making it work, if that makes sense. There's no other way to put it besides you're making each other aware of your schedules, keeping each other in date. I mean, every relationship is based on communication, I feel like, but that just shuffles things quite a bit. But anyways, what a dense first deal breaker to kick this off. We're literally all 21 and under, and that went somewhere. Let's hit the second deal breaker. I think this is kind of an interesting one. A common deal breaker is smoking. People don't want to deal with the smell of cigarettes or drugs of any type.
For me, for my roommate, and I can tie it back into myself. My roommate dated this one guy, and she said that she had asked him to quit. He said he quit, but she could always tell when he did smoke or did anything. He smoked cigarettes. I don't think he smoked any cannabis of any sorts, but he smoked cigarettes for sure. But she said she could always tell when he was smoking, and I don't think the smoking necessarily was her problem. It was like she didn't like it that much, so she asked him to quit, and when he said he did, but then he lied about it, that was where the deal breaker came in. For me personally, I'm not a big fan of like the smell of cigarettes, but it doesn't bother me like if a guy is smoking a cigar or something along those lines, because I don't mind the smell of a cigar. But like for cigarettes, I don't like the smell of cigarettes, and I'm not a big fan of the smell of weed. So I just don't want that smell. You know, that's me. I don't want the smelly aspect of the smoking. For
me, in my mind, it's almost like the addiction aspect of it that would kind of be like a turnoff for me. Like if you don't have control over a part of your life, I feel like you kind of need to gain control. If you are someone that is enslaved to an addiction of cigarettes and stuff like that, like you don't have control over that aspect of your life. You have to do it, right?
Yeah, going off of like what you said, like in a relationship, you want to like commit yourself to each other like as much as possible. And I feel like if you have like that addiction or something that is pulling that one person away from really being like dedicated to it, I think that can be really strenuous and one and kind of pull people apart, because there's that thing in the middle that is really causing a divide, which can be a problem.
Yeah, I see it from the opposite side, only because I don't have an addiction by any means, but like socially at parties and such, like I'll partake if it's available, like in smoking. But my boyfriend would not. It's not that he doesn't like it, but he doesn't care for it, and he makes it known that he's not a fan of it. He's never been like really aggressive and being like, you can't do that, I'm breaking. It's not a deal breaker per se, but it's kind of one of those awkward things where it's like, I don't even really want to, because I know it's gonna like annoy him.
Yeah, I totally get that aspect. On it not really being a deal breaker, it's just not a preference, because my boyfriend, he used to smoke quite a bit, and he's toned it way, way, way down, because he knows that I don't like that he does it. So it's just kind of in a way a respect thing. Like if I was doing something that he didn't like, and he was like, hey, like, can you tone this down a little bit, or can you not do it when you're around me, or whatever it may be, out of respect for him and because I care about him, I would just stop doing it or not want to do it. Like what you were saying, Megan, about how your boyfriend, or how for you with your boyfriend, you don't do it because you're like, oh, out of respect for him. Like I don't want to have that conversation. I can avoid it. I don't need this substance.
Yeah, and you know what? It just reminded me, actually, my mom used to smoke cigarettes when my parents were dating, and he straight up said to her, if you do not quit, I will break up with you. And I'm really curious on like what exactly like was causing him to do that. Just, you know, like health-wise?
Yeah, was it health? Was it smell?
Yeah.
Or was it like,
It's
or was
probably
it
health-wise,
yours? Was it, or could have been what you were saying, Carl, about the addiction aspect, where it's like you are reliant on this thing now. Because for cigarette smokers, that is a habit. Like that is that is an addiction for sure. For the most part, like that is, you smoke cigarettes and you just get addicted to the nicotine and the hand motion, and even the social aspect of smoking. Back in the day, back when our parents were younger, they would smoke in social occasions at work. Like they would go out on a smoke break, and that would be their social interaction with their coworkers and whatnot.
Yeah, I think it's definitely toned down quite a bit. I feel like people just don't care quite as much. I mean, like I said, like in my relationship, it's kind of like it just isn't cared for. And it's even on my end, I don't think it's necessarily a respect thing of like, oh, I'm not going to do it because he doesn't respect it. It's more so like, I just don't want to piss him off. I just rather avoid it altogether.
Not like respect. It was more like, you don't want to do it because you respect him.
Right. Exactly.
That's what I meant. Not like you don't respect his, the choices and all that stuff.
Yeah, we're going to move on to deal breaker number 3. This is if the person you are with doesn't like music, especially country music.
As Country Carl, I would like to say something about this. I've actually had a girlfriend who, that's funny, she's my shortest relationship, but she did not like country music when we first started dating. She absolutely hated it, but every single time she got in the car, I would always have country music on. And now she is probably one of the biggest country music listeners that I know. So music, genre-wise, across the board, I think, like, if they don't like it, it's okay. Like, you know, it's your own opinion, but, you know, I'll brainwash you to like it.
I like how you're like, I'll brainwash you to like it. I think for me, if somebody doesn't like my music taste, I agree with Carl. I think there's a way for you to associate, like, good feelings with what you like, what I listen to.
Give them
whoever.
ice cream every time you play.
Like, if they like me and they know I like a certain song that they didn't like before they liked me, then when they hear that song, they would more than likely think of myself. So I'm not saying in like a selfish way or like a, what do you call it? Like a, can't think of the word. I'll come up with it. But like in that way where it's like you are associating a song that you didn't necessarily like before you met me to me now, and that's what makes you like it. So that's for Carl, for you, Country Carl. That's probably why she started to like country music, is because she liked you and you liked country music. So she was like, I'll give it a whirl. And then she just started listening to all the country music and like actually taking the time to give it a chance and like dig deeper into different sides of country that she likes.
Good
or
for
doesn't
her.
like.
That's insane. I would never.
Yeah, I feel like going off of that, you know, like a lot of like the advice you get with relationships is like, don't go into one with trying to change someone to how you want them to be. But I feel like with music, like music is something that can definitely like, that kind of goes against that, you know, like in like Carl's case, like, you know, you can change someone's music taste, but also as Ashley was saying, like with like, if that one song reminds them of you or of a time you had, like if there was one song you had, like an event you were at, I think it has that power to, like, even if you don't necessarily like that genre, to kind of bring people together more.
Yeah, there's so many elements of music too that, like, even if you don't like the sound of it, like Reid said, you might like the lyrics or you might relate to something. And I think you can change your opinion of music. I feel like I've done it a couple times where I would just like switch genres that I listen to, and the more you listen to something, the more you're gonna like it. It becomes like, I don't know, there's probably something scientific to what we're saying, but yeah, I think music, I don't think music should be a deal breaker.
I guess you can say, like, if I don't know the lyrics to a song that somebody is playing and they're like jamming out to it, I don't like it because I can't sing along or I can't participate in like the jamming session. But if I know the song, then I'm more likely to be like, yeah, okay, I know the song, like we can have fun, we can jam. So I guess there could be that aspect where it's like you're not familiar with it, so it's unfamiliar to you, and you're just like kind of in that, not I don't say uncomfortable because it's just music, like you're just listening to it and trying to enjoy it, but it's like that type of, like, you're unfamiliar, so you're like, I can't partake.
I think we're thinking really deep into this.
I feel like
that we don't have to.
Going off of what Ashley said, I feel like even if you don't know a song though, I feel like even like when you hear like that intro again, or like you hear the song, like a certain part of the song, I think you can still be reminded of that experience or something, like that certain memory with that person, even if you don't really know what the song's about or you've never heard the song before. If you hear it, it can maybe trigger something in your brain that says like, hey, I remember this one memory, and now that song has a completely different level of meaning that wasn't in the lyrics or wasn't in any way it was written. It's just what you have in your mind.
Yes, that's romantic, Reid. Ladies,
Reid's phone number is.
I lost what I was gonna say. I think maybe I didn't. I will find it. Is it there? I don't think it's there. It's not there. Yeah, Country Carl's right. It's not there.
that's all right. We got it. Let's go to the next deal breaker. We delved into that one. It should have been just a quickie, but I find this one interesting, especially for our age group, is if they're a boring texter. I feel like I, in high school, would have said yes, but now I don't quite care as much.
For me, I'm in a little bit of a different situation because my girlfriend lives 300 miles away. It would be very hard for me to carry a conversation or carry a relationship even if they can't do that online.
Yeah.
Or over
I'm
text?
in a long distance relationship too.
Really?
Yeah.
How far away are you guys?
He lives in Connecticut, so he's pretty
Oh,
far.
wow. Yeah.
He's far.
Yeah, that's far.
But I don't think like texting is that big of a deal.
But I think it's got to be one of your main modes of conversation.
It is.
And if he couldn't carry a conversation, the way I read boring texter is that it's basically like pulling teeth to try to keep a conversation going.
Yeah. Okay, and I dated a guy a couple of years ago, and this was like my first time, I think, like having a really traditional like dating relationship where like he asked me on a date, we met at like a pizza place, and we were just like going on dates. We weren't really like texting, which I feel like in our like generation it's more like, can I get your Snapchat? Can I get your number? And we're gonna text about some stuff, and then we're like, after maybe some random amount of time, maybe gonna hang out. But this was very like, we did not text at all, and he was very short with texts, which I did not like. But like when we were together, it was great. So I was like, oh, this is just, and he was a little bit older, so I was like, oh, maybe he doesn't really like text. Maybe it's like, that's not how this is gonna be. But I think in our generation, it's a lot more like text heavy.
Yeah. Sorry. I just think a lot of communication nowadays between relationships is over, text.
I think for long distance relationships, it's definitely important. But for ones where like you go to the same school or things where you aren't long distance, I think I feel if you're in that relationship, you should be enjoying more being together, and you should enjoy that interaction when you're actually together. And that text message would just be more for just setting the date, and then you know like, okay, they may be a little bit more not like as enthusiastic, I guess, over text, or you may just not be reading it properly. But like in real life, if you enjoy them, I think that it really shouldn't matter how they text then.
Yeah, for me, a bad texter isn't a deal breaker, but what I have noticed is my boyfriend and I, we are in the same state. We are, of the 3 people in relationships, we are the ones that are actually like in the same state in this room right now. But we text quite a bit, and then we see each other every single day, or for the most part, every single day. We FaceTime quite a bit. But I do realize that when he isn't texting with as much like words or as enthusiastically as Reid was saying, I do notice that, and I read into it way more than I would if he was always the same, or like just like less texty. And the same goes for me too. Like he can tell if I'm just being one wordy, or I'm not giving as much enthusiasm or some sort of energy, because he'll be like, are you okay? And I'll be like, yeah, I'm totally fine. What's wrong? And he's like, well, you just come off like you're upset or something. And it's like, I'm not, but it comes off like we read into things way differently because we are a very text heavy generation. So when things are off, it's noticeable.
Yeah, and there's also kind of the situation in relationships right now where you have to be in constant communication, and that is a really hard thing to do. And when with my ex, a lot of the time we were talking every minute of the day. Right, if we weren't on FaceTime, then we were texting. If we weren't texting and not, then we were together. And in a lot of that, like, even if I'm just like trying to play a game, like, yes, like I love you or whatever, and I want to be talking to you all the time and whatnot. But if you can't FaceTime me, like you're at the mall or whatever, and I'm just trying to play a game, I'm just gonna flat out say like, hey, I'll text you in an hour. Like, but this idea of having to be in constant communication, it's hard.
I think like the constant communication is hard, but I feel, I don't know, I feel our culture today puts a lot of emphasis on it, and more than necessary, because I feel like even if you aren't in constant communication with someone over text, I feel like that would make the time that you hang out in person like more special, I guess, because you look forward to it more, you anticipate it more, and honestly that would give you, I feel, more to talk about, because there are some times when you like, if I'm like meeting up with a friend and like I've texted them before like with all the details and stuff, and we've gone over stuff about like, and then we get there and there's like, okay, well we've talked about a lot of this stuff now.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just more to do if you don't really have that constant communication.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying, Reid, about like not having the constant communication, because I'm a big believer that if you do everything with your significant other 24/7, you don't have separate hobbies, you don't have separate friends, that's how you can kill a relationship pretty quickly, because there's nothing else to talk about other than what you've experienced together that you've already done. So I'm a big believer that to have a healthy relationship is you both have to have separate hobbies and separate groups of friends that you hang out with, that you talk to on the daily. Because if you hang out with constantly with the same people, or you constantly are doing the same things all the time, then when you're not doing anything and you're just hanging out, you run out of things to talk about. You can't just talk about your day and talk about what's new and what's exciting, because you've experienced it all together, which is, in a way, it's nice, but it's also, it can be like detrimental to the relationship.
Yeah, I think even too, like with texting all day, I'm guilty of this because I'm pretty needy. I used to be like, if he wasn't texting me like for like 2 hours, I'd be like,
He's breaking up with me.
I'd literally be crying. Like, is he in a car accident and I'll never see him again? Like, I would be thinking the worst, and I think that's really unhealthy as I say it out loud, but at the same time, I would be texting him all day. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? At the end of the day, when I could like call him or see him or whatever, I already know every single detail of his day. I know what he ate. I know what he's like smelled. Like, I know way too much. I know way too many details because I've been like in too much communication. So like, I've now learned to scale it back quite a bit. And I think Fortnite has helped with this. You mentioned games, and I just immediately Fortnite popped in my brain because it's the bane of my existence. Like,
He'll
he
just be playing the game?
He is in another. He's gone. That's
Really?
not him. He's
Really?
busy. He busy. That's his time. That's
I was just using a game as an example.
No, that's when I can like. That's me time. That's
No,
like
in a-
I have so much time to do things when he's playing Fortnite because I know it's gonna be a minute.
I totally agree. I love when I'm like, I have to do homework or something, and my boyfriend, he'll watch his podcast because they're like 2-3 hours long. So then I know at this time I can get like my homework done. I can take a minute to like read through all my emails, check like my Snapchats that I haven't been looking at because I've been hanging out with them. Because I try not to be on my phone when I'm hanging out with my boyfriend because I don't want him to think that his time isn't valuable to me. So I try to put it away. Or if I'm on it, I usually let him know, like, oh, I'm just on Facebook, or I'm checking this, or I'm texting so-and-so, so he doesn't think that I'm just straight up ignoring him. But, yeah, I totally agree with that, Megan. It's nice to know that you have that you time where you don't have to be in constant, like, contact with the person. Even though you want to talk to them, you want to hear about what they're doing, talk to them, get to know them a little more, even though you probably know them really well. But it's, like, just having that time to just be you, and just not have to touch your phone or not look at it because you know that he's busy, and you know that you don't feel bad for being busy because you're a very busy gal, and I don't know your boyfriend, but I know that you're always doing something. So I bet for you always feel bad if you can't text him when he's available. Mm-hmm. So when he is not available, you probably feel like, okay, I can get this done without feeling like I'm neglecting them.
Yeah. Well, I mostly just feel neglected. When I have stuff to do, I'm like, who? And then when he's like playing video games, I'm like, you love video games more than me. But I'll be like out with my friends for hours, and I'll be like, oh, I forgot to like, you forget to like check your phone. It's like, it's unrealistic. I'm sure, Carl, you can really relate to this. Like, even in college, like, things just come up. It's like, it's so unrealistic to talk to someone constantly, especially when you're long distance. It's like an additional pressure because you're compensating for
not being able to see them at all.
Physical presence.
Exactly. And a lot of the time, you know, like, she goes to school, I go to school, she has to wake up really early, so she'll go to bed, and we're an hour behind. So she'll go to bed my time at, like, 9, you know? And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm just getting out of class. Like, how the heck are we supposed to do this? So, I mean, she's busy with work and homework and whatnot, but it's always like you just have to kind of cherish those times when you can talk, right? So, I don't
100%.
know.
We're going to go to the next
Let's
deal breaker, which I think should be this one, 41, indecisiveness.
Whoa. Oh, this is that's a big deal because I feel like every single girl that I've been with or ever, like, even went on a date with, I'm always like, oh, hey, like, where do you want to go? And it's always ended with, I don't know. You know, I've never gotten a straight answer, honestly. And it's just gotten to the point now, I want to know how you feel about this. It just got to the point where if they say, I don't know, be like, or the guy saying, okay, here's what I was thinking. How do you feel about that? I know it's a little off, but
I'm so indecisive.
You are?
Even making the sentence, I'm trying to pick what I want to say. So I can completely understand how frustrating it is by the reaction of my own partner of being like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I don't know what I mean. You should figure that out. So I understand how it's a deal breaker. I think just you need to like really try to crack through someone's surface when you like, once you noticed like a behavior pattern that's kind of annoying, you need to just nip it in the butt. Like I have a good, I'm happy with the person I'm with because they'll be like, they'll tell me what's up. They're not gonna like play around with me being a brat or me being indecisive. It'll just be like, you're being indecisive. Like, you need to make a decision.
For me, I don't know. This is like a tricky question because I don't think I'm an indecisive.
The indecisive females.
Yeah,
Oh my god.
I don't think that I am the most indecisive person ever because I have my opinions and like if you're like, where do you want to go to eat? Like, I know in my mind where I want to go to eat, but I don't want to come off like I am being like super picky or I'm being not giving you a chance to give that option. Because like Kyle will be like, oh, where do you want to go to eat? And I know in my mind I'm going to want to go to Taco Bell. But I'll be like, oh, I don't care. Where do you want to go?
You make me the maddest person in the world.
Would you rather me just always say Taco
100%.
Bell every single day?
And I'm not going to speak for Kyle, and I don't mean anything bad about him.
Taco.
But in my mind, it's always I've been raised as a gentleman, and I've been raised in a way of like you do what kind of the woman wants in a way, right? So if she wants to go to Taco Bell, then you're going to Taco Bell. Now, if that means that you like have to eat something that you don't particularly like, then you do it because that's what she wants, right? So in my mind, just tell me what you want, and I will get that for you. And I will we will go to Taco Bell, and even if it's like, oh my gosh, I'm allergic to Taco Bell, then I'm gonna stop at Taco Bell and get you a damn taco, and then we're going next door to wherever, and then I'll eat, Like, if that's what you want, then that's what I want to give,
Kind of going off of that, like, with wanting to do what the girl does in the relationship. But, like, for me, like, a relationship for me is, like, what I want is, like, someone that I can share, like, my hobbies and passions with. So, like, and like, they should want to do the same with me, So if I ask them, like, well, what do you want to do for the date? And they say, like, oh, I'm really interested in that. I'll be like, okay, cool, we can check it out, instead of being like, well, I don't know. And then I'll be like, well, maybe we could do this. And, and it just goes back and forth, and you feel like you're going nowhere if no one, like, first makes that, like, initial suggestion, I feel.
I think in any relationship, there needs to be one indecisive person and one decision maker. Because if it's, okay, there could be two decision makers, but if there's two indecisives...
No, I completely disagree with you.
Really?
I think
you think two indecisive people would be well.
I don't
in a
agree with that.
relationship?
I think two indecisive people won't work. I think one indecisive and one decisive works, and I think two decisive work. I think two decisive people work as long as they're good-hearted people. If they kind of have like the same type of view of like, okay, I made the decision last time. What would you like? If you're willing to give up your decision for someone else, then that will work. If you're not, then it will never work.
Yeah. Ouch.
Ouch.
I didn't even consider like, oh, if both people are decisive, well then you're gonna butt heads again because it's gonna be like decision made. No, this decision, like
That's what I would think.
I didn't even really consider that.
Because Kyle doesn't like Taco Bell, but I love Taco Bell. And
I'm sorry, Kyle doesn't like Taco Bell.
No, he does what Carl
Deal
does,
breaker
and
number
he'll bring
50.
me Taco Bell just because he knows I want it. Like he's
That's
picked me up
sweet.
before, and he's picked up Taco Bell for me, and then he's gotten something else. So it's worked out really well. But eventually, it's gonna get old. He's gonna be like, no, I'm not having Taco Bell, and I'm gonna be real upset, and that'll be a deal breaker for me.
Let's get Taco Bell.
Oh, Carl.
So many deal breakers. I feel like in my actual relationship, I don't have anything that I'm like, that is a deal breaker.
I completely
aside
agree.
from this list, there's nothing that
These
has ever made me say absolutely not.
These are deal breakers. I would agree with red flags.
Yeah.
Like abuse-wise and stuff like that, and things that are scary and whatnot. But these are like
if they
like
listen to country
emotionally
music,
abuse,
it's abuse.
emotional abuse and like stuff like that. Like,
forcing someone to listen to country music against their will is abuse.
Okay, all right. We're no longer together, so no, but you know what I mean. Like
Yeah, no, I
red
get what you're
flags,
saying.
obviously, sometimes you can't see them, but if they're pointed out too, then that will something that you obviously have to like take into consideration. But a lot of these deal breakers, like, it's just more of like differences that it's not that hard to kind of correct,
Very wise.
Yeah, very wise for a young Jedi. For me, I guess the only thing that I would say is a deal breaker for me is like post graduation, out in life. I'm a very go-getter. Like, I want a job. I want to be working. I don't want to be sitting at home all the time. Like, I actually have things that I want to do with my life. So if the person that I'm with, whoever it may be later on in life or now whatever, I want to make sure that they have a job that they enjoy, that they're not miserable in. So if they don't like their job and they're just miserable and they either, one, don't want to work and just be lazy and not find a job, or they just want to work in this miserable job and complain all the time, like, that would be a deal breaker for me, because it's like, you have to be happy. If the person you're with isn't happy, then it reflects on you. It not reflects on you, but like it rubs off on you, and then you start being unhappy because the person you're with isn't happy, and then it's just a whole bunch of unhappiness and bad vibe and bad energy. So for me, I guess in retrospect, for me the deal breaker would just be like somebody who's not happy, and like I can't make them happy. They have to make themselves happy. So if they're not happy, then it just gets sadder.
Okay, I think I found my deal breaker actually thinking about it. Being late to everything.
Ooh.
Which is kind of weird because right now my girlfriend is late to everything, and I'm not saying that I'm like nothing bad, but like we've made it, like we've been very good at making it work, and I've been trying my best, but just recently, like I sat down with her and I was like, listen, like this is gonna drive me insane. Like like if anything, like I just need a little bit of like effort in this category, and I think it's something that you could like always work through. All of these deal breakers to me are something that you can work through and actually have a conversation about, and then continue to have a healthy relationship. I don't think any of them are truly deal breakers if both people truly want to be in the relationship.
I think going back to what Ashley said, like the one deal breaker for me is like someone that like just doesn't have like much drive. Like when I meet someone, like especially being in college now, I'll ask them like, well, what are you studying? And then they'll tell me, I'm like, well, what do you want to do with that? And if they say, I don't know, that's like, okay, like, do you not have like any like slight plan for your future? Like, I want someone that like kind of has like a vision in mind of where they want to go in life, and like they know, or like are beginning to know the steps that they need to take to get there. Like if I meet someone that's like, well, I'm going to graduate then, and then I want to get a job doing this, and I want to do this, and this, I'm like, that's cool because you have the drive and the motivation, and if you have that already, then I know that you'll want to do it. So that's kind of where I stand.
I agree with that. I kind of forgot about that. No drive is like really hard for me too. If someone doesn't, especially with working, for me, my boyfriend's really good at saving money, and I'm not. I'm a spender, but I work a lot, so I feel like it's justified.
It's like a balance.
He hasn't been working quite as much, but he has saved so much money during the times he has worked. Like, he'll work over the summer and spend no money and have like enough money to sustain himself. He has so much saved, which I find really admirable, but I'm also like, are you not motivated? Like, do you not want to do this? And he's like, I'm good. Like, I'm secure. So I think it's all things, I think like Carl said, it's all things that can be worked out and getting used to people, but I'm just a mess. I feel like I'm not allowed to have any deal breakers.
I think now that you talked about like the financial aspect of it, I think that's a big thing for me too. Like, I want someone that like knows how to like manage money, because I don't want someone, well, yeah, it's going to be difficult, but I don't want someone that like gets their paycheck and it's like gone already, because I'm like, okay, like you can like I like early in the relationship, like that's not my ground to step on, but eventually, like once you get closer to like once you start talking marriage, maybe finances come together, and like I want someone that knows how to manage money, especially that eventually if it'll be like a joint account or something like that, because I don't want to have my paycheck going in there and suddenly being like, okay, where did it all go? I want someone that I know can be responsible with it, because eventually I think you get to that point where it is shared, so you need to have that trust in each other.
Guys, we really dug deep into all of those topics today, so thank you so much for being on our podcast. That was really fun, and I think it's really interesting to see your guys' perspective, because we are so young. So I think for a lot of adults, they think that our view of relationships are more just time fillers, or we view them too seriously. So I think it's interesting that we've all have different perspective, or we're all on the same page, just have a different way of thinking about it.
I totally agree. And you both are so well spoken. You guys can actually tune into Reid and Carl's podcast, would you like to give a little shout out to your own?
Yes, you can find us, Headphone Jackasses, on YouTube and Spotify. We upload noon every Friday.
And it's about technology.
It's technology, whatever
random
topic
technology
we
stuff
want.
that we did. Last week was a watch episode.
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks.
2
was
weeks
a watch
ago.
episode.
Yes.
And who knows what's going to come next.
Yeah.
So.
Very good. I'm a fan. I'm going to subscribe right now.
You're saying you're not already
I'm a fan,
subscribed?
but I will subscribe.
She was admiring from afar. Didn't want to creep you guys out before the podcast.
Of course. If you want, you can follow me at MG Creative Collab on Instagram. Ashley?
You can follow me at Ashley Byhun, Bihun, on Instagram. That is one word, not Ashley Byhun and then Byhun again. It's Ashley Byhun, one word.
They've already unfollowed you.
Yeah, they did.
I
I took too long to explain. How about you, Reid?
You can find me on Instagram, Reid, REID .P as in podcast.
Oh, wow. You can find me at CWZAHN. CWZAHN. Or look up Country Carl, because we have radio shows and whatnot.
Got all that, folks?